before I go over the sugar loading days, here's what I would do. I would do a low-fat carb deplete day on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, okay? Now, I would sandwich that in between my Mondays and Fridays where I would do an isolated sugar load day. And I'll cover the details here in a second. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I would do a low-fat carb up day. And I'll share why and the effect of doing this in just a second. So, with that being said, what I would do on my sugar loading days, okay, which is Mondays and Fridays, I would go ahead from noon to 1 p.m., breaking my fast. After that fasted training, I'd have a sugar bomb bowl. And this is usually around 200 grams of carbs, 150 to 200 grams of carbs. So a banana, a pile of berries, maybe a nectarine or a peach, a tablespoon of honey, a tablespoon of maple syrup, and then a teaspoon of sugar. That would be my fruit bowl. I'd have a side of juice, which is about 8 ounces of juice for another 35 to 40 grams of sugar. And then, of course, for dessert, I would have Trader Joe's gummies because I'm trying to avoid regular candy because Trader Joe's gummies actually have just cane sugar in them. And the other fillers that they have are pretty natural versus buying Skittles or Starburst or gummy worms or something like that. And I'd do that again at 3 p.m. and I'd do it again at 5 p.m. And, of course, I'd constantly be tracking my calories and my carbs at this point in time. And then at 7 p.m. I'd switch gears because I was tired of the fruit, and I'd have a bowl of rice, usually about 1.5 cups with orange sauce. And then 8 or 9 p.m. if I was still hungry, I'd go ahead and have some sourdough bread or rice cakes with jelly and sliced bananas on it. And at the end of the day, when I added everything up, I'd be right around 700 to 750 grams of carbs total, which is 2,800 to 3,200 calories. Now, let's give some context on this and give you all 3 of these days. Let me see if I can push this out a little bit. There we go. So let's cover these in detail. First, we have the low-fat carb deplete. Now, this is the day that I would use on a normal photo shoot prep. And I would usually do this Monday through Friday. And there'd be a lot of suffering because I would be hungry. Now, the key is when you keep protein really high like I am here, you create more satiety. So it does make it easier if you lean into your meds, meat, eggs, dairy, seafood, and of course, if you're not a fan of those, plant protein is fine as well. In my opinion, I think meat is king. But at the end of the day, if I kept this higher, 225 to 250 grams of carbs, 2 things would happen because I was in an aggressive deficit. The whole goal is it's a fat burning day where I want to deplete glycogen, I want to burn fat, and I want to protect lean muscle. Well, how do you do that? Well, you keep protein really, really high. I'd have about 75 to 100 grams of carbs, which is really low carb for me, guy who's lifted weights for 26 years. But it was just enough to fuel the workouts and the performance to give me the energy to make the workouts intense enough to stimulate and protect that lean muscle. And then, of course, fats were low in the basement, 25 to 30 grams. And you can see the deficit on these days. I mean, my maintenance burn on a daily basis is probably about 27 to 3,200 calories. And so this is a pretty big deficit, but I do know that we underestimate how many calories we consume even when we're tracking by 30 to 50%. There's several studies now that prove this. And so taking 10 times your goal body weight is really a good sweet spot when you're trying to be in an aggressive deficit because you're going to end up more than that. You're going to end up about 12 times your body weight. Example, I'm 185-ish, right? I hover around 185 area. I shoot for that 17 to 1,800 calories per day, but I know I'm going to be around 22 to 2,500 because I'm underestimating how many calories I consume on a daily basis. This has always worked for me and everybody I've ever worked with. Now, the second day, which is a Monday and Friday, this is the isolated sugar load days. This is what made this whole process so much fun because I would look forward to these days. And of course, the whole goal here is to refeed and replenish glycogen in muscle and liver tissue with carbs. Boost hormones, right? While being in a slight deficit. And what I've found is that you can go very, very high carbs on these days and even high calories. And it's almost impossible to store fat because your liver is firing on this isolated sugar in the absence of fat and protein. So you're in a slight deficit. And there's 3 hormonal effects that are going to happen here. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to skyrocket or boost FGF21. Now, this hormone has been shown in research to acutely reduce inflammation and boost metabolic rate. The second thing that's going to happen is you're going to skyrocket T4 to T3 conversion because your thyroid is fueled off of glucose. This is how your body can produce adequate thyroid hormones, and why a lot of people who do keto and carnivore for extended periods of time need thyroid medication, because they're not giving their thyroid the fuel that it needs. But when you're pouring gas on the fire with just this isolated sugar, you're going to light up your T4 to T3 conversion. And of course, your thyroid, your metabolic gas pedal. And then, of course, this increases ATP production, which also leads to mitochondrial uncoupling, a very powerful fat burning effect. It is a stressor though. So disclaimer there that this is not something that you want to do all the time. Now, my protein was in the basement. I would get about 10 to 20 grams. I mean, a cup of rice has about 5 grams of protein, right? So by the end of the day, I was still at about 10 to 20 grams of protein. Fruit even has maybe a gram, some of them, or 2 of protein in it. But my total carb grams would typically be 700 to 750. I think one day I even reached over 800. And then my fat grams are really, really low, just residual fat, maybe in a little bit of coffee creamer or what shows up residually in my fat-free dairy. Now, that is Mondays and Fridays, and my calorie intake would be around 2,500 again to 3,300. So I was definitely supposedly more in a surplus on those days, but because it was isolated sugar, your body just burns it off. It's almost impossible to gain fat on these days, guys. Then Saturdays and Sundays, what I would do, just have balance to prevent deficiencies, to, basically maintenance, variety, and flexibility, is I would do a low-fat carb up day. And what I would do is I would find healthy cheat recipes, low fat, and we would just sub out ingredients, anything that was fatty, on a cheat meal recipe that was healthy, like your favorite comfort foods. We would just swap out and hack it and go ahead and remove all the fatty ingredients and replace it with low-fat ingredients. And on these days, because carbs are higher, around 300 grams, I know that protein doesn't have to be as high, because carbs are very muscle sparing and they reduce protein turnover. So when carbs are higher, you don't have to worry about getting as much protein like I did over here when carbs are way lower, right? So again, 150 to 175 grams of protein, and then fats would come up a little bit on that day to prevent deficiencies, and I'd put them at around 50 grams, and it'd be about 2,200, 2,500 calories. Always grateful when people take time to watch my videos. So if you got some value, hit a heart, hit a like, drop a comment below so I can keep providing more value. Next up, I'm going to provide a video on an entire day of this in detail, from the time I wake up to the time that I go to bed. And if you click the link in the description, you'll see various ways that I can help you. Thanks for watching. God bless, and keep going strong.